2021 Independent Taxpayers Oversight Committee, or the ITOC as we're known. Thank you, staff, for pulling this together. I'd like to thank everyone who may be on the phone or watching who's a member of the public. Thank you for taking the time to join us today. I'll ask our clerk to confirm that we have a quorum. Kimberly, do we have a quorum?
Yes, Chair Kenny, we do have a quorum.
Well, thank you very much. All right, before we get started, I have a couple of announcements. First, on behalf of the committee, we'd like to welcome Susan Huntington as the Director of Financial Planning and Budgets. Her title has been revamped to more accurately describe the many functions the Director of the TransNet program heads. Susan will lead the efforts in financial strategy and programming, capital projects office, the ITOC program oversight, and the budget functions from the finance department. Welcome, Susan. We're glad to have you.
Thank you very much.
Perfect. Secondly, I'd like to ask our interpreter, Carlos Diaz, to introduce himself and walk through how to access our interpretation services for today's meeting. Carlos.
Good morning and buenos dias. Thank you, Chair Kenny. As has just been indicated, we will have interpretation available for this meeting. To use the service, please scroll down to the bottom of your Zoom screen where the meeting controls are. Then click on the interpretation icon. It looks like a little world, and then select English as your language. If you are joining through the Zoom mobile app on a cell phone, tablet, and so on, first press the ellipsis, the three dots, then interpretation, and then choose your language. And finally, click on mute original audio to not hear the original Spanish flow in the background. This message will now repeat in Spanish. Buenos días y bienvenidos, bienvenidas a esta sesión del Comité Independiente de Vigilancia por Contribuyentes. Se cuenta con servicio de interpretación simultánea para esta sesión. Para hacer uso del servicio, por favor desplácese a la parte inferior de la pantalla de Zoom, donde aparecen sus controles, haga clic en el icono de interpretación, parece un globo terráqueo, y seleccione Spanish o Español. Si está utilizando la aplicación móvil de Zoom en celular, tableta, etc., primero presione los puntos suspensivos, luego interpretación y luego el idioma. Por último, si no desea escuchar el audio original en inglés en el fondo, por favor seleccione Mute Original Audio o silenciar audio original. Gracias, and thank you, Chair.
Well, thank you, Mr. Diaz. All right, so we're going to have the liaison to the committee, Ariana Zerniden, just run over the rules on how to access the public speaking portion of it. So Ariana, if you could go ahead and do that for us.
Absolutely, Chair Kenny, thank you. The members will be using their cameras and we will take live public comments. Members are asked to turn on their cameras when they have a comment or question, and then Chair Kenny will recognize you. As noted on the cover page of today's meeting agenda, in addition to emailing comments, the public may also provide live comments during today's meeting. And in order to provide live comments, you can join today's Zoom meeting through the link or by dialing one of the numbers from your phone that are provided on the cover page of today's meeting agenda. You can join the meeting by clicking on the Join Webinar link provided in the confirmation email that you will receive upon registering. And when public comments are called for on an item on the Zoom platform, click on the raise hand icon in the Zoom toolbar on the top right of the screen, and the chair will call on you by the name you provided. If you are participating by telephone, please press *9. The chair will call you by the last 3 digits of your telephone number. And the instructions for providing live comments are also on the bottom of the cover page of today's meeting agenda, which can be accessed from the homepage of SANDAG's website at www.sandag.org. All comments, whether emailed or live, will be made part of today's meeting record. Thank you, Chair Kenny.
Sounds good. Any questions? Okay, let's get started. So the first item on the agenda is public comment communications from the members. This would be for comments not related to anything on the agenda, for comments related to everything but what's on the agenda. So are there any members of the public who would wish to speak? Question for the clerk.
No, Chair Kenny, there are no public comments.
Thank you, Kimberly. Are there any members of the committee who would like to offer some comments? Seeing no hands, we will go ahead and close item number 1 and move on to item number 2, which is our executive director's report. Welcome, Director Carter. Take it away.
Thank you, Chair Kenny. Good morning, committee member. Good to see all of you, and thank you for all that you do for Sandag on the Oversight Committee. Few things to mention to you. One is on the congressional funding earmarks. As you know, earmarks are allowed this time around. And I'm happy to report to you that the proposed legislation right now that's going to go to the House floor this summer includes $12.5 million for Los Angeles, $12.5 million for Otay Mesa 2 Court of Entry, and $25 million for the Central Mobility Hub. Let me tell you how significant this is. So that's a total of $50 million for Sandag project. And this tells you two things. One is the nature of the project, and two, the strength of our delegation in Washington, D.C. The $25 million for the Central Mobility Hub is the largest in the country of any earmark in the country, not just the state. Congressman Scott Peters and Congresswoman Sarah Jacob did that for Otay Mesa 2. In addition, we work with Caltrans, where Representative Issa put a $20 million request for an interchange in the 1578. We're very happy with that. As you know, the three projects that submitted by Sandag and got earmarked are 3 of the 5 priorities that the agency had. And I want to thank our congressional members, all of them, for truly doing a great work on behalf of the region. Speaking of that, the 5 representatives, Vargas, Issa, Peters, Jacobs, and Levin will be here this Friday to tour Otay Mesa 2, and we'll be thanking them in person. As you know, the region released the Regional Transportation Plan the 28th of May. It's out for public review until the end of July. I encourage you to let stakeholders know that we're receiving comments. We're going to have an open house, workshops, a lot of outreach, and we welcome any comments. And truly, it's a remarkable piece of work that we're trying to reimagine the future of transportation system that the team did. Also, we just celebrated opening the Ross Creek Bikeway lane, which is one of the busiest in the region. I think it's fair to say that this completion means a lot to a lot of bikers from a safety and connectivity standpoint. And speaking of the bike program, something that's gonna come to this committee very shortly. We're planning to go to our board of directors and start the discussion of doing a few things. One is we're probably gonna ask the board to move the bike program into the major corridors. And 2, we're gonna ask the board to increase the bike allocation from 2% to 3%. In addition to that, we will be asking the board to approve $8 to $10 million for pilot and social equity, mainly on 24-hour transit service and on youth free pass for transit. Those pilots will be identified as soon as the board approves us going with the money. I also want you to know that the South Bay Rapid bus program that we have in South Bay that comes from Otay Mesa all the way to downtown San Diego was recognized again by the engineers, by the Society for Civil Engineers. And we're proud of that project. The last thing I want you to know about is our Sandag returning to the office. As many of you know, a survey that Sandag did and a survey that's many surveys that done by others around the country. Overwhelming majorities of employees don't want to really come back if they can help it. On the other hand, over majority of employers want their employees to come back. And Sandag is no different. Over majority of my employees, after talking to all of them in the last few months, don't necessarily want to come back. They want the flexibility. On the other hand, we made the decision that they'll have to come back. All employees, executive team started coming back to the office last week. We're going to start after the 15th when the state so-called open for business. I'm going to start gradual return to the office with full return to the office by September 7th for all employees. And also full return of the in-person board meeting and committee meetings by the 7th. We have we are dark in August. We're going to get ready for that eventuality. All employees will be coming back by September 7th. We're going to allow once every 2 weeks, 1 day for employees to telecommute if their supervisor deemed this is appropriate. Obviously, because we were able to reach more public through the internet, we're going to continue that and figure out the technology to continue opening our meetings to the public via the internet. But if you visit Sandag office, you see more people now. If you visit in September, you'll see all 375 of us back in the office. And the first board meeting in September will be done in person. Unfortunately, our infrastructure, IT infrastructure is not suited for a hybrid model for the board meetings. So we can't have half and half or part here and part there. Chair Kenny, that concludes my report. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Well, thank you very much for your report. Exciting news about eventually getting back to in-person meetings. Before we take it up to committee for discussion, Kimberly, are there any members of the public who would like to comment on this issue?
No, Chair Kenny, there are no public comments.
Do we have any questions for the director from committee members? To my gallery view. All right, I see no hands. So with that, thank you very much for the presentation, and we will see you at the next meeting.
Thank you, sir.
With that, we move on to our consent calendar. That is items 3 through 7. Do we have, is there anyone who would like to pull any of those items before we take the consent calendar? Yes, are there any committee members who would like to pull any of those items?
Chair Kenny, I would like to discuss item 4 for a comment.
Okay, so we will pull item 4. Vice Chair House has asked that we pull item 4. So we will go ahead and do that, take that off the consent calendar. Items 3, 5, 6, and 7 remain. So we will entertain a motion on the remaining items on consents. Do I have a motion?
I can move to approve the meeting minutes.
Move to approve the meeting minutes, the item number 3 on consent. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second by Mr. Fuller.
A clarification, is that 3, 5, 6, and 7 or just 3?
That would be 3, 5, 6, and 7. It's just important to note that item 3 is an approval item and does require action. Items 5, 6, and 7 are information only. And we can take action or not. If we're taking action on the whole consent calendar, it will be 3, 5, 6, and 7. Any discussion? Clerk, if you could call for the roll. I'm sorry, the vote, please.
Okay. Real estate right-of-way, Jonathan Frankel.
Yes.
Licensed civil traffic engineer, Chair Kenny.
Yes.
Contractor construction, Pedro Orso Delgado.
I would like to abstain on item number 3 since I was not present.
Okay. Biological environmental, Dustin Fuller.
Yes.
Finance and budgeting is absent. Licensed engineer, Les Hopper.
Approve.
And CEO private sector vice chair, Sunny House.
Approved.
That motion passes.
Oh, item number 4 was pulled from consent. Do we have questions for staff?
Yes, I just want this to be on the record that I understand that the report is for as of end of March 31st. So a couple of the items, a couple of the contracts have expired since then or are in the process of being amended. Tracy, I just wanted you to go ahead and explain that for the record. So, are you on mute, Tracy?
Okay, yes, good morning. Thank you, Vice Chair House. So yes, these quarterly reports are based on the quarter of January 1st through March 31st of 2021. Our grantees actually, these are progress actually is based on April. So that actually gives us about a month to go through the progress reports and update all the status reports and stuff to get this report ready for you, for your board. So, but anyway, yes, you are correct. There are some projects, I thank you for pointing those out, and I sent you an email kind of explaining that. But for the record, row 7 and row 21, there was on attachment 1, those projects have been updated, and they will be updated in the next report. So row 7 is now complete. The project is complete, and the that was for the National City Transit-Oriented Development Plan. And so the council adopted that plan on June 1st. The city adopted that. And so we have the final deliverable on file if anybody wants to take a look at the plan. On row 21, I believe that's a project for the county. That also reached its expiration date. However, there was amendment that was provided at the end of May for them. May 28th, 2022 is now their new expiration date.
Thank you, Tracy. I appreciate it. Just wanted to make sure for the record, everyone was aware of the progress. Thanks so much.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, and also, since I have the floor, I'd like to also point out attachment 2 is a new attachment that I'm going to try to provide with completed projects. So it gives you a slide of pictures of the completed projects and their accomplishments. And SANDAG wants to congratulate the City of Vista for receiving an award from APWA, the American Public Works Association, for green streets and sustainability. And you can find that in the attachment.
Congratulations to the City of Vista.
Yeah.
Good for the City of Vista. Well done. This item number 4 was presented to the committee as an information only item. We're not limited to that. Vice Chair, do you want to do anything other than receive and file?
No, Chair Kenny, receiving was just fine.
All right, so thanks staff for their follow-up on that, and we will receive and file item number 4. That concludes the consent calendar, and we will move on to our reports, and the first one being item number 8. I'd like to welcome Pedro Orso Delgado to the committee. That was a welcome surprise when I heard that. Pedro has a well-established presence in the San Diego area and transportation circles. He has got a wealth of knowledge, and we're fortunate to be able to tap into that. Pedro, if you could just hit the highlights of your resume. We don't have time for all 4 pages, but if you could go ahead and cover your background, we'd appreciate it. And welcome, Pedro.
Thank you very much, Chair Kenny. And it is an honor for me to serve here and participate with all of you. I mean, the basic highlights is I graduated from San Diego State, go Aztecs, and I worked at Caltrans for 25 years. And later I went to work for the city of Santee. And currently I own my own firm. It's a one-man shop. And lastly, as you can see in my background, that's from Amsterdam. Since semi-retirement, I have become a world traveler. And I think that's helpful for this committee because it allows me to compare systems throughout my travels with what's happening here locally. So I just want to thank everyone and hopefully I won't embarrass myself.
Sure you won't. Welcome. Mr. Orso Delgado will be filling the position of a professional in the management of large construction project category. Also very pleased to announce that Vice Chair House was reappointed and will continue to serve in the position of private sector CEO category. So congratulations, both of you.
Thank you.
Are there any members of the public who would like to speak on this issue? Let's see, hands up.
No, Chair, there are no public comments.
Thank you, Clerk. Any comments from my fellow committee members? All right, I'm sure they join me in welcoming and congratulating both of you. All right, with that, we will go ahead and move on to item number 9. It's a presentation by Mr. Needham about actions related to ITOC items from the Transportation Committee and the Board of Directors. Mr. Needham.
Thank you, Chair Kenny. Your last meeting was on May 12th, and since then, the Board of Directors adopted the Transnet Extension Ordinance Administrative Expenses Amendment, which was reviewed at your meetings in March. The board also approved the fiscal year 2022 program budget, which included the ITOC operating budget recommended by this committee at your February meeting. The draft of the 2021 regional plan also was released in May, and the board held several public workshops on that same topic and will continue to do so, as our executive director mentioned in his remarks earlier today. And then in addition, the Transportation Committee reviewed the State of the Commute report, which your subcommittee helped to develop and which you reviewed at your last meeting. And that concludes my remarks. So I'm happy to help answer questions.
Thank you, Ariana. Are there any members of the public who would like to speak on item number 9?
No, Chair Kenny, there are no public comments.
Thank you, Clerk. Are there any questions for Ariana from members of the committee? Seeing no hands, as this is an information only item, this committee will receive and file that and thank staff for their time in preparing the item. With that, we're going to move on to item number 10. It is a presentation from our consultant, Schoberg Evershank, on the 2021 TransNet Triennial Performance Audit. Ms. Brady.
Good morning, everyone in the committee. I think Leanne's going to start off first today, and then I'll wrap it up at the end. It should be a short presentation.
Welcome, Leanne.
Thank you. Good morning, members of the ITOC. I'm happy to be here to share with you our final TransNet audit report. I will go through the sites relatively quickly since there have not been any major changes to the draft report we presented to you on March 10. Next slide, please. Next slide. Sorry. There we go. As you recall, we were tasked by ITOC to focus this year's audits on 10 areas shown on this slide. They included some standard ordinance required scopes, such as looking at compliance with the ordinance, ITOC practices, and where the program stands in terms of progress against the ordinance. But there were a few new areas such as AB 805, deep dives into safety, and the bike EIP. Next slide, please. When we wrapped up our audit late last year, there was a lot of uncertainty about what was going to happen with Transnet projects that have not yet started and how or if they will be considered as part of the, at that time, in development 2021 RTP. So most of our audit results involved making sure there's sufficient transparency and accountability on Transnet progress and status. Other results, as bulleted on these slides, related to finding that CNDAG continues to be compliant with Transnet, has improved its financial models and safeguards surrounding reliability of data, and bicycle and pedestrian safety statistics have improved as well. For regional safety planning, we found that more could be done to get CNDAG involved, and we had no recommendation in our AB 805 section since we found that the weighted voting did not impact Transnet projects at all. And lastly, when looking at your committee and comparing you with similar talks, we know that some others had additional member expertise areas that were not currently available to ITOC. Next slide, please. In terms of recommendations, there were no changes to the 26 recommendations themselves, except the Transportation Committee had asked we remove the word consider from the 6 critical recommendations. All recommendations can be found at the end of each report chapter, as well as combined starting on page 1 of the report if you'd like to look again. Next slide, please. What was a little different this audit was that after we presented the draft to you and the Transportation Committee in March, we also went in front of the Audit Committee in April, but there were no substantial edit requests from any committee, and the feedback was generally positive. That's all from me, but Kathy, did you want to share next steps before we take any questions?
I will.
Next slide, please.
Thank you for that. Thanks, Leanne. This slide, once we get to the next slide, shows a summary of our presentation timeline as we work the draft report through the various committees. We came to ITOC first in the Transportation Committee and Audit Committee. So typically we go to the board with the final report as well after this presentation to the ITOC, but we just received notice this week that we will not be presenting to the board in June. So this will be the final presentation for the FY21 Transnet Triennial Performance Audit. So before we leave, next slide, please. We really just wanted to extend our appreciation and deep thanks to CNDAG and Caltrans, the city of San Diego in particular this cycle. Everyone was helpful and responsive to our data requests. They were professional and friendly, really made for a pleasant audit experience on our end. Hopefully it was on their end as well. And we also wanted to thank the ITOC Audit Subcommittee, Brad and Stuart, Sunny and Tracy, who provided us such valuable insights and feedback throughout the audit process and really helped with the format on the audit report to help it, I think, really look readable for the taxpayers. So thank you everyone for your time today. And with that, that concludes our presentation.
Well, thank you very much. I see one hand up from a member, but before we do that, for the clerk, are there any members of the public who would like to speak?
No, Chair, there are no public comments.
Thank you very much. So back up to committee. Do we have any comments from the committee members for the presenters? I see Vice Chair House's hand up. Sunny?
I just wanted, first of all, on behalf of the Audit Subcommittee, thank you both, Kathy and Leanne. You were a pleasure to work with, very accommodating to our comments, and I think the audit results are very well stated. So congratulations again. Thank you so much for your help. I am looking forward to finding more about how CNDAG is going to implement these audit results. And we've had some preliminary discussions, but Ariana, maybe you can share what the plan is for implementation.
Yes, absolutely, Vice Chair House. I would be happy to. So typically what happens after the audit concludes is that staff gets to work on reviewing and analyzing options in terms of implementing the audit recommendations. And as you know, we do bring a regular report to the ITOC about twice a year on the status of the implementation of the recommendations so that we can receive your input and your feedback in terms of progress. And in past years, the ITOC has also elected, for example, with the FY18 performance audit, the ITOC decided to establish a subcommittee to work closely with staff in implementing recommendations, which is certainly an option for you. We could potentially, look to bring you an update on the status of implementation, possibly maybe this fall. I would think we would have something to report out, I hope, and maybe give us that opportunity. And then maybe if you feel, we need a subcommittee, we would be happy to work with you with that. That's pretty much how we've handled it in the past, but we're open to any further suggestions that the committee may have in terms of implementation.
That sounds good. Thank you. Maybe we can discuss the subcommittee, the need for a subcommittee later down the line as we see the progress. Thank you so much, Ariana.
I saw Pedro's hand go up. Sir, do you have a comment?
Yes, and I think Ariana and Sunny already addressed it. My question was, what was next? I mean, we have this wonderful report, what happens afterwards, but I got the answer. My other question has to do with, I believe I heard Kathy mention that it was not going to go to the board this coming June meeting, but it is going to the board at a later date, isn't it?
So maybe I can clarify. So the ordinance requires that the performance audit in its draft form be presented to the transportation committees, which it was in March. And then the scope of work for this audit included an option to present to the board. That's not typically something we do unless that's requested, specifically requested. But the results of the audit definitely do go to the board, just not as a presentation on the performance audit itself, but as part of the presentation of your annual report. So that definitely is scheduled for the June 25th board meeting. And that is on your agenda for final approval today as well. So the audit results definitely do get communicated to the board as part of that presentation.
Thank you.
I see a hand up from Jonathan Frankel. Mr. Frankel.
Thank you, Chair Kenny. Ariana, I believe we have a special meeting scheduled in July for the purpose of reviewing the draft RTP. Is that correct?
We do have held on your calendars July 7th for a special meeting of the ITOC. And I think, that would be an opportunity for us to begin the discussions about some of these performance audits, in particular, the critical recommendation that has to do with the TransNet projects as they currently are included in the ordinance and what those are envisioned to look like as part of the regional plan update process and making sure that those are aligned. So that will be part of the conversation on July 7th.
Great. Yeah, thank you very much. That was exactly my request. You took the words out of my mouth. I think it would be an opportunity to talk about the major corridors and some of those TransNet projects that either may or may not be included in the RTP update.
That's right.
All right. Any other members of the committee have questions for staff? Seeing no hands, I would ask that we just visit the accept action that's requested of us. So is that a final action with no further movement of this item? It won't go to Transportation Committee. It won't go to the board, or do we need to recommend it go to Transportation Committee for approval?
So the ITOC, consistent with the ordinance, the ITOC's role is to accept the final performance audit report. And it did already go to the Transportation Committee in draft form, also required under the ordinance. And it will go to the board, but as part of your annual report. So
Okay, so the board won't be approving, they'll be seeing it, but they won't be asked to take any action. It's all right, so this is kind of final. All
That's
right.
right.
Thank you very much for the presentation and answering the questions. The committee is being asked to accept that. Do we have a motion? Anyone care to entertain a motion?
I move to accept the report.
Vice Chair House has a motion to accept it. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
I believe that's Les Hopper with a second.
Correct.
If the clerk could call for the vote, please.
Okay. Real estate right-of-way acquisition, Jonathan Frankel.
Yes.
Licensed civil traffic engineer, Chair Michael Kinney.
Yes.
Contractor construction, Pedro Orso Delgado.
Yes.
Biology environmental, Dustin Fuller.
Yes.
Finance budgeting is absent. Licensed engineer, Les Hopper.
Yes.
And CEO private sector, Vice Chair Sunny House.
Yes.
And that motion passes.
All right. Well, thank you for the presentation on item number 10. That takes us to item number 11, which is the presentation on the 2020 TransNet Fiscal and Compliance Audits. Yen Ho with Sandag and Ms. Farr, Jennifer Farr with Davis Farr are here. Take it away.
Good morning, Chair Kenny and everyone. Jennifer Farr could not make it, so she sent over Kyle Haas and Becky Park from Davis Farr LLC to present. My name is Yen Ho. I'm the Assistant Finance Manager at Sandag. Today is the final piece of the fiscal year 2020 audit process. Kyle will walk you through the final steps. Once he's done with this presentation, you'll come back to me for an action item. Then we'll close out this item. Kyle?
Thanks, Yen. Hi, everyone. Thank you, committee, for having us today. My name is Kyle Haas. I am a manager at Davis Farr LLP, the audit firm that conducted the examinations for this year. I am joined by a supervisor here at Davis Farr, Becky Park. So now that we're in the final stage of the examination process, I just wanted to briefly walk you through the steps of how we got here. Last June, the ITOC Audit Subcommittee was provided with the proposed procedures for review. And at the July ITOC meeting, these procedures were approved. The Davis Farr team scheduled and performed the procedures for the 24 agencies subject to review from September to December 2020. At which point the draft reports were presented to you on March 10th, along with the agencies that did not meet some of the requirements. On March 19th, the Regional Transportation Committee recommended the approval to the Sandag board for the agencies which did not meet all of the requirements. And now ITOC is accepting the reports for release and issuance. So I just wanted to remind everyone that we reported the following 3 findings in the draft reports. The first being that the city of Poway was not in compliance with the maintenance of effort or MOE requirement. Next being that the cities of Coronado, Lemon Grove, and National City did not consistently use the approved exaction fee of $2,533 from each newly constructed residential housing unit. The agencies are in the process of collecting additional amounts from the developers. And lastly, the last finding was related to the bus and rail operator eligibility for both MTS and NCTD. After NCTD requested approval for the exclusion of costs, the bus and rail operator eligibility requirement was met. MTS requested the use of a 3-year average, which cleared the rail operator finding, but the bus operator eligibility requirement was still not met, mostly in part due to the impact of COVID-19 on the bus services. So that's all that I had on our recap for our audits here. I'm going to go ahead and turn it back over to Yen at this time for the recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Kyle. So today we have an action item. ITOC is asked to accept the final fiscal year 2020 TransNet fiscal and compliance audit reports prepared by the independent audit firm Davis Farr LLP in accordance with the agreed upon procedures, so the final audit reports may be issued. This concludes our report.
Well, thank you very much. Before we take it up to the committee for discussion, are there any members of the general public who would like to speak on this?
No, Chair Kenny, there are no public comments.
Thank you, Kimberly. Are there any questions for our presenters from the committee? I see Ms. House, or Vice Chair House, has her hand up.
I don't really have a question, but a comment regarding the eligibility for the transit agencies. I know this topic has come up before and ITOC has reviewed it and decided to keep what's in the TransNet, but I think down the line, in the following months, we need to have a discussion about this again, because it seems like there's just difficulty meeting these requirements. And I think we need to take another look at it and come up with a better solution so that we don't have to go through this process every time and do an exception. So.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments from the committee members? I see Mr. Halpern's hand is up. Stuart.
Thanks, Mike. I'm just reminded when I hear about the audit, the question of where, if somebody could refresh our memories as to where we are in the cycle in terms of the contract duration for Davis Farr, and when that contract period might be up and we'd have to be engaging in either an extension or reviewing an RFP. Does anybody happen to recall where we are in the cycle?
I believe this is our 4th year, so next year is should be our last. Is that correct, Kyle?
I believe so. I can have Jennifer speak to that once she's back and send you an email, Yen, about that. But I believe that's the case.
Yeah, I believe so too.
Okay, yeah, because I just know it's a reasonably extended process to when there's an RFP, and so I just want to make sure that somebody's keeping an eye on the calendar. But yeah. Otherwise, I don't know if we had a motion to accept the financials, or if there's a need for a second. I can't recall. But I think these guys have done a great job, so I certainly either move we accept or second if there's already a motion, and vote yes.
There is no motion on the floor, so that would be your motion, sir.
Okay, then I will make the motion that we accept the financials as presented.
Motion has been made. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second from Mr. Frankel. Just before we move to the vote on that issue, for what Sonny said, the issues with the transit agencies and their exception, the next opportunity to have any kind of discussion about that would be if there's an amendment made to the ordinance itself. I think there was some talk about doing that in the future, separate from what they just amended. So if that gets on the schedule, I want to revisit this issue prior to that. So we might have an opportunity with an amendment to the ordinance to address it. But in any case, it's addressed for the purposes of today. So again, thank you for your presentation. A motion and a second. If the clerk could call for the roll, please.
Real estate right-of-way acquisition, Jonathan Frankel.
Yes.
Licensed civil traffic engineer, Chair Michael Kinney.
Yes.
Contractor construction, Pedro Orso Delgado.
Yes.
Biology environmental, Dustin Fuller.
Yes.
Finance budgeting, Stuart Halpern.
Yes.
Licensed engineer, Les Hopper.
Yes.
And CEO private sector, Vice Chair Sunny House.
Yes.
And that motion passes.
All right. Well, thank you very much for your presentation. That takes us to item number 12, which is a presentation by Ms. Barajas, the final 2021 ITOC annual report. Julie?
Thank you. So good morning, ITOC members. I'm here today to present to you the FY21 ITOC annual report. I would like to thank the committee for all of its thoughtful comments, and special thanks to our annual report subcommittee, which was made up of Stuart Halpern, Les Hopper, and Chair Kenny. There was no additional substantive feedback provided since your last meeting on May 12, 2021, and only minor changes have been made by staff such as grammar and wordsmithing. I would like to highlight one change though, if production can bring up our slide. Thank you. So I know this was previously mentioned in the fiscal audit report, but again, I'd like to highlight it, that we did have to make one change, which was recently brought to our attention. And that was the fiscal highlight section, which is the last bullet on page 4 of the annual report. Despite the exception requests submitted by NCTD and MTS, which were approved by the board of directors, MTS could not reach compliance with their bus services. However, the board of directors will not enforce any penalties resulting from the noncompliance due to the unfortunate events triggered by the COVID-19 pandemic. In earlier drafts of the annual report, it was stated that they were in compliance once the eligibility requests were approved. So we thought that we should communicate this to you prior to asking for your approval today. So what we're asking from the committee is to provide your approval of the report, and if approved, Chair Kenny and staff will present the report to the board of directors at their June 25th meeting. So are there any questions that we can answer for you today?
Well, before we have any questions from the committee members, well, first off, thank you very much for the presentation. Are there any members of the public who would like to speak on this issue? Seeing none.
No, Chair Kenny, there are no public comments.
Thank you very much. We'll go ahead and take it back to committee for discussion. Are there any comments or questions for staff? I don't see any hands. All right. Well, this is an item that staff is asking for approval from the ITOC, so I will go ahead and make the motion to approve the report. Are there discussion on the motion or a second?
I second.
Second from Vice Chair House. And if the clerk could call for the vote, please.
Real estate right-of-way acquisition, Jonathan Frankel.
Yes.
Licensed civil traffic engineer, Chair Michael Kinney.
Yes.
Contractor construction, Pedro Orso Delgado.
Yes.
Biology environmental, Dustin Fuller.
Yes.
Finance budgeting, Stuart Halpern.
Yes.
Licensed engineer, Les Hopper.
Yes.
And CEO private sector, Vice Chair Sunny House. And that motion passes.
All right. Well, thank you very much. That concludes item number 12, and then moves us to item number 13, which is a continuation of public comments. These are comments from the public that are not related to anything on the agenda. Do we have any members of the public who would like to speak?
No, Chair Kenny, there are no public comments.
think it's also an opportunity for committee members to offer comments for the greater good. Are there any comments from the committee members? Just another welcome to Pedro Orso Delgado, and congratulations to Sunny for your reappointments. All right, with that, we will go ahead and conclude item 13. I did note that the next regular scheduled meeting is July 14th at 9:30. And I believe there is it proposed or is it on the calendar now for July 7th? Ariana?
It is on the calendar. It is on your calendars currently.
Also at 9:30?
Also at 9:30 on July 7th. Yes.
So July 7th and the following week, the 14th at 9:30 for both meetings. And with that, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you all for your participation. What did I miss?
I see ITOC member Stuart Halpern has his hand raised.
Oh, Stuart, I apologize. Mr. Halpern.
Not a problem. Just for clarification, Ariana or somebody, the content for the special meeting, how is that going to be different from the numerous presentations about the 5 big moves that have been done for the board, the Transportation Committee, for public community engagement? Is there going to be something different, or is it essentially going to be pretty identical content?
It will be different. My understanding is staff would like to take a deeper dive into the Transnet projects currently in the ordinance and how those align to what is envisioned to be included in the 2021 regional plan. And so the focus will be that, which is consistent with one of your critical audit recommendations as well.
Got it. Okay.
So that is part of the conversation.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? All right. Well, thanks again. And the meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you all.